Hey, it's Theo and thank you for joining me. The expansion has been out for a few days, so naturally I got a best decks video for you. Now I've got 15 decks for you prepared. Usually it's 10 of the best decks, and then the last 5 are maybe decks that didn't quite fit in the top 10 or just decks for classes that don't really have a great deck, but I want to put a deck in for every class. So let's get started with the very first one, and yeah, you've probably seen this one already on ladder. It's the Elemental Mage. It's got a lot of good new tools for the expansion, so it's kind of turned into like a fire elemental mage. Now it's still pretty similar to before, where yeah, you just want to play an elemental every turn, but now you've also added the fire spells on top of that, and yeah, they are pretty good. So the new cards we have now for the expansion are the Spontaneous Combustion. Yeah, just good damage. Now one of the better new cards, I'd say, is the Blazing Aggression, and they are drawing 3 cards for 3 mana while being an elemental. Yeah, that's pretty insane. So really helps this deck. Now I'm gonna say Molten Rune is almost new, but yeah, it works really well with Sarune. We'll get to later. If you have a full board of Overflow Surges with spell damage, that's basically 20 damage, and yeah, that usually wins the game. Especially with the Lamplighters, of course, that well, you know, did the old ton of damage. Another new card is Solar Flare, so yeah, just cheap AoE, can easily be 0, and yeah, again, with Overflow Surger combined with Sarune, can just clear about any board. And last new card is that Sarune. That gives all your elementals in your deck +1 fire spell damage, and yeah, all your spells are fire, so they just buff all your spells. And like I said, combined with Overflow Surger, stuff can get pretty crazy, tons of burst. And yeah, the stack is just really strong, extremely popular for a good reason, because it not only can build like super fast at early board, but it also can just deal a ton of damage and basically become an OTK deck. So that's why it's the first deck I want to recommend. Now the next best deck is the Odyn Warrior, which is basically the main counter to the Mage, because yeah, it can get a ton of armor and it has the board clears, so it kind of counters the Mage on basically the 2 things the Mage wants to do. So that makes this a pretty strong, but it doesn't mean it's bad in other matchups. It's just really good in most matchups. The deck is still kind of similar to before, not too many new things. One of the 2 new cards that got added to the deck is the Hostile Invader. I mean, it's really strong, right? I mean, that's destroys any deck that wants to play for board. 2 AoE, then another 2 AoE if you play a spell, and then if it dies, another 2 AoE damage. And yeah, because Odyn Warrior, you don't really play for board. This is only upside, so really strong addition. And as you'll see more often, this card deck is also playing the Ceaseless Expanse. By turn 9, 10, usually you can play it, and yeah, it's pretty strong in a deck like Odyn Warrior, because it allows you to yeah, clear the board for 0 mana and then focus all your mana on just killing the opponent, so taunts won't stop you. And the next deck is the Frost Deathlight, still really good, but yeah, sadly no new cards, so yeah, it's just the same thing as before. This one is running Leroy for more burst, but yeah, this is what you've seen before. Not much to add to this deck, just a very strong and consistent deck. Now, next up we have another deck that yeah, is not really running new cards. It's the Pipsi Paladin. The one new card that is running is Lumia, but I'm not sure if it's necessary. But yeah, it seems like a pretty strong anti-aggro tool. That's kind of what this deck struggles with. Other than that, it's kind of the same as yeah, before the expansion, right? You got the early the rogue stuff to ramp up to your Pipsi. And then, yeah, you can OTK with Glow Sticks, or OTK with Horn of the Windlord with Divine Brew if you've played Lynessa, so bunch of possibilities. But one addition, though, to this meta is that it's now running Cold Feet here, and it's running here Cold Feet in the ETC, and that's because, yeah, that Elemental Mage again, it's so popular. So tech against Mage can be pretty good, especially Cold Feet, just basically if you play it by turn 5 or earlier, yeah, the mages cannot play any elemental, and yeah, that basically breaks their elemental chain, and that hurts them a lot, right? The Overflow Surgery doesn't really work that well. Lamplighter does a lot less damage, and yeah, it's just basically a time warp, so that can be really strong. And it feels like this card you can run in almost any Death Knight or Paladin deck if you really try and want to counter that Mage deck. And of course, the Zilliax here is the Unkilliax, because we're playing the Pipsi, so yeah, that's the Zilliax you want to summon. Then next up we have another deck with yeah, no new cards. It's the Nostalgia Shaman. You know, I'll try to find decks with new cards, but the stats for this deck are just too good to ignore, so I have to put it here. And yeah, it's just the same as before, right? Like you try to get some tokens on board early, and then play Wave on 5, and then, well, if you don't have Wave, you can also win with Bloodlust, and or build a board with Razzle Dazzler. And we have the Zilliax, which is just yeah, the buff one, as you can expect from an aggro deck. Then next up we have the Highlander DK. Kind of surprised this deck was here, and yeah, it's doing really well in the stats, even though you don't have any specific Death Knight Highlander cards. But yeah, it's doing well. It's playing a few new cards, of course, against Ceaseless Expanse, because you're playing a slower deck. It's also running 3 10-drops. That's pretty rare in a deck that doesn't ramp. Other new card is the Exarch Maladar, and yeah, that's gonna be nice to actually cheat out those 10 mana cards a bit earlier. Well, we got Airlock Breach. I mean, you play Death Knight, you can play this card. You want to play it. It's pretty insane. And then I think the last new card here is the Kill Jaden, or Airlock Breach number 2, but yeah, the Kill Jaden, just yeah, infinite value. Can be really insane in the late game if your 10 mana cards don't already win. And next up we have Ram Druid. This one does have a few new cards, but even though you're only running one Starship piece, you can resummon it a bunch of time with the Hydration Station. The other taunts you have are like Ziliax, of course, which is pretty important to keep resummoning and keep staying alive with that. And then the other taunts is the Unar 5/5 you can get, the Crystal Cluster minion. But yeah, ideally you get the Ziliax in these defense crystals, and then you can also summon the Starship, and if that dies you can also resummon the Starship and get more Arcanite defense crystals to resummon even more. So yeah, tons of taunts in this deck. And then again, kill Jaden at the end to well, get that infinite value after all your taunts, if somehow the opponent can deal with that. And next we have a well, yeah, not very new deck. It's the big spellmate. Yeah, you know this deck, but it's still putting up great stats, so that's why it's here. But yeah, same as before. It's you know what this deck does, and it does it very well. And then we have Mage Warrior. This deck was basically the most popular deck in the Brawl. But now in Standard with the old 3 expansions also available compared to the Brawl. Yeah, this deck didn't gain a lot, so it's just a good deck, but not really that broken like it was in the Brawl. And yeah, it's not really playing any new cards. I mean, I've seen lists where you play the new card Hostile Invader, so you can run that instead of some other cards, or an Aftershock, just more anti-aggro. Well, this is a bit greedier, but yeah, you can decide which way you kind of want to be going. Then after next up we have the Egg Hunter. This one is running a few new cards, especially the new Exarch Nayel is absolutely insane. I mean, getting 1 extra draw a turn, but you can even discover. Yeah, it's one of the best cards from the set. The other new cards this deck is running is the Detailed Node. So yeah, you get the Beast and reduce it, so you can play this early and maybe get like a 4 mana Mukla, a 5 mana Sasquatch, and it helps sure your Stranglethorn Heart. Other new card is that the Rangari Scout that yeah, can double up on those discovers. So yeah, for 1 mana, sometimes you can discover a bunch. Especially after Nayel, you can play Nayel, then you play this, and then you're tracking, and then you get like 2 trackings, and then those trackings get 4 more cards, and yeah, it can snowball like crazy the value of this 1 mana card. So always keep that in mind. And yeah, it's called Egg Hunter. It has the Mystery Egg, right, to cheat out the Hollow Hounds, Bukla, Sasquatch, Plush early, and that can be pretty strong, especially if you do it multiple times with Yelling Yodeler. And last new card we have is the Alien Counters, and yeah, with those discovers in your deck, this goes down pretty fast. And what is not to like about the 2/2/5 taunts for 0 mana. Then we go to Starship Death Knight. I've played this a bunch and did that pretty well for me. So of course, yeah, running a bunch of new cards with the Starships, but it's also running the Unholy Blood rune configuration, so that means you can play the Assimilating Blight, and yeah, this can be pretty strong, especially if you hit a Starship piece, or something other with the Death Rattle, but especially Soulbound Spire of the Assimilating Blight is pretty nuts. So that's why this card is very good. Other new card again is that Soulbound Spire, yeah, just needed for Starships. And if you have a few of them die, either with well, the Assimilating Blight getting it, or Bruthalbone Buccaneer on the Soulbound Spire, yeah, you get a bunch of 10-drops while having taunt with that Arcanite Defense Crystal, and it's almost impossible to kill. And then if they kill it, you summon a bunch of 10-drops. So that's it's really strong about this deck. Other than that, again, it's running Airlock Breach, Maladar. Of course, it's a Starship deck, so you run the Exodar. And if you do this, just getting the pieces often is good, unless you really need the armor. The damage feels a bit weak, like 8 mana and then getting 10 damage. That's often not quite enough, but there's certain situations for it. But I think generally getting the pieces back for 1 mana has been the best for me, but again, you have to look at the situation and what it requires. And of course, since it's a slower deck, it's running the Ceaseless Expanse, and the Ziliax is just the double perfect module. Then we have the Pirate Demon Hunter. Yeah, not quite as good as before. It used to be pretty top tier, but it's gotten a bit weaker. So this build is running the Starship pieces, but it's not really required. You can do with or without. But as always, I prefer to show decks that are running some new cards. I think that's more fun, but you're perfectly fine with just running kind of the old builds. So yeah, those are just the new cards it's running. It's running the Fel-Fused Battery, so yeah, +1 attack. And yeah, by itself, it rarely actually gets you the attack. It's more for that combined Starship that you want to combine with the Shadow Shard turret, which has Rush Wind Fury. So yeah, the combination is really good, especially if you get 2 batteries with one of these. That basically means you can give all your minions on your board +4 attack, and yeah, if you set it up with something like Dangerous Cliffside, for just 6 mana, you can have 20 burst in a turn. It's gonna be pretty insane, though. Yeah, it requires a bit of setup, so it's not very common. And the other new card you're playing is the Warp Drive. Yeah, I mean, Arcane Intellect that cheats up to 4 mana. What's not to like? And again, the Zilliax. You know the one. If you're playing the aggro deck, you're playing the buff discount one. Now we're getting to the bit weaker decks here. We have here a Wheel Warlock with Kill Jaden in it. So you can either play this Kill Jaden after you play Wheel, so you never take that fatigue damage, or you can play it before. That's fine, because Wheel Warlock, even though it says destroy the deck, Kill Jaden is an endless portal, and if you don't know, literally nothing can stop the Kill Jaden portal. Everything you discover or draw from your deck, it's gonna be a demon. No bombs, no TNTs, nothing that can stop it. And then besides that, yeah, the deck is pretty similar to what the deck was before the patch. The Zilliax is the usual. You got the Seasonal Expense, as in many of the other decks. So not too many new things for this deck, but they do help a little bit. Now then we have a Priest deck. Yeah, Priest not doing too well. As always, you have like a Zarimi Priest doing well, but yeah, most people don't want to play that. So yeah, I've got Highlander Priest here with a few new cards, and it seemed alright in the stats. Not amazing, but not completely unplayable. So this deck is running a lot of the new cards that I was fortunate enough to review. So we have the Lightspeed here, got the Orbital Halo here, also running Kurid, a Light Beyond, especially it goes well with those 2 new cards. And we have the Mystified Tocha here in the ETC, because yeah, this deck is maybe not really built around changing your health too much, so it can be a bit more difficult to proc, but yeah, it can be pretty insane if you actually get to 42 health with it. And besides that, yeah, it's just Reno Priestess before, right? You got the Elise to summon the Zilliax, or the Amalthus, or the York, hopefully, and not one of the weaker ones. And then yeah, you try and copy that Elise, hopefully multiple times, or the Amalthus, and or you copy your opponent's win con with the Puppet Theater. So yeah, just the really strong late game is always for Highlander Priest, but yeah, it's just struggling a bit against combo decks or aggro decks, so that's why it's not that great, but I think it's playable at this point. And then as the last deck, we have the Quazar Rogue. The stats on this deck are pretty bad, but actually the higher you climb, yeah, the better the deck gets. So this deck is still the same as the other Quazar decks, where you just want to go as soon as possible, go prep Quazar while you have like Quick Pick equipped or Knick-Knack Shack on the board. But other than the Asteroid build, this deck can just ignore the board and just only deal direct damage. And this deck has a ton of it, so even a card like Tarslick can sometimes deal 3 damage with the spell damage. You got Eviscerate, you got Harmonic Hip Hop, even for 1 damage, sometimes it's enough. Or even better if you have a weapon equipped. Oh, Manager deals 3, 4, 5 damage. I mean, Tactical Grip, see often for 5. And yeah, if you can play all those cards in the same turn, which you usually can with this deck, yeah, you pretty much always win the game. So I feel like this build is actually slightly better, because you can't actually whiff with the Knick-Knack Shack on a Shadow Step. Like, you play this, you get immediately Shadow Step, you have no minions. Yeah, you can't do that, but in this deck, everything is playable and makes it a little bit stronger. Still, it's not the best deck to climb, but it's a new deck, so that's why I wanted to cover it here. And those are the 15 decks I want to recommend. As always, deck codes are in the description. Let me know in the comments which one you're going to be trying out, or if you're missing any deck lists here. Thank you for watching, and until next time.